You've got to be especially wary of journalists when they're all saying the same thing. Welcome to the program. I'm Chris Kenny. There's been a lot of that sameness around lately as journalists make the same exaggerations over the police raids, the so-called police raids at the ABC and the home of News Corp's Annika Smethurst. Lots of hyperventilating reports have suggested that journalists are the targets rather than the leakers. And that there are emerging threats now of a police state mentality. Seriously. Now, there are real issues to be debated here, and we will get to those later. But let's just look at how frank and honest some media has been in ventilating these issues. Check out the reporting around a whistleblower currently before the courts. Richard Boyle is a former Australian Tax Office employee who went public with claims of maladministration for the ABC's Four Corners program in April last year.
We were essentially ordered and directed to start doing standard garnishes on every case, and I was absolutely shocked. That meant, and I stated, that we may be shutting down the wrong businesses and causing great distress to the community, and possibly even pushing people towards suicide that needed our compassion.
Now, Boyle faces 66 federal and state charges for allegedly disclosing confidential tax information and allegedly making covert recordings. When the Sydney Morning Herald covered the story this month, an online summary said he was charged with offences and potential sentences totalling 161 years, almost as many as serial killer Ivan Milat. And in the body of the story, reporters Adele Ferguson and Chris Gillett used the same possible total sentence, saying it was more than some of the country's worst murderers and rapists. 161 years? More than a serial killer? That's a sensational story. Even the ABC went with the same line in this graphic. But surely that claim sounded a little hysterical. Did any of these journalists wonder when they'd last heard of anyone being given such a sentence? As you know, and as they must have known, when people are sentenced on multiple charges, courts are far more likely to allow them to be served concurrently. Boyle is facing 66 charges, and while the allegations are serious, 65 of those carry a maximum penalty of 2 years. And another carries a heavier penalty of, wait for it, 3 years. By our reckoning, even if you total all the possible sentences, it comes to 133 rather than 161 years anyway. But the point is that all this is ridiculously unlikely. It would be like a shoplifter with a sweet tooth stealing 10 Mars bars from 10 different shops, then being arrested by police and tried for 10 separate counts of larceny, then getting a maximum sentence for each Mars bar and being sentenced to 50 years jail over an armful of chocolate. Our justice system just does not work like that. It's a ludicrous proposition. Which begs the question of why the ABC and the Sydney Morning Herald would engage in such a shamelessly misleading beat-up. We couldn't help but think that someone should refer them to Media Watch so that Paul Barry could expose their deception. But hang on a minute.
Former ATO debt collector Richard Boyle is facing 66 assorted charges that could see him jailed for 161 years.
Surely not. Media Watch too? And just to be sure, Barry doubled down.
One person who should be protected by the Public Interest Disclosure Act, says Brown, is ATO whistleblower Richard Boyle. Yet he's now potentially facing a lifetime in prison.
A lifetime in prison? Turn it up. Dare we say, Media Watch, your appraisal sounds like a sensationalist deception. You know, the type of tripe that you love to rail against when it comes from your perceived ideological enemies.